Okay. Hello, everybody, to the May 21st issue of the ClusterAPI Node Bootstrapping Working Group. We're a sub-project of ClusterAPI and as such part of the CNCF, and we adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Please be nice to each other. Having said that, I just give the mic to Mike, who already started before we started recording. Let's get it going.
Right. The context here is I've been doing more research, building this proof of concept to show, an alternate way of doing ignition. And as I'm getting deeper into the ignition details, um, I'm having some questions about what are the expectations around ignition, from like a data perspective and whatnot, the user data as it comes in, and how that looks in contrast with what the cloud init kubeadm bootstrap provider does currently. And so like what I've been looking at is taking the source data that comes in, and then that gets put into a secret, and then seeing if we could take the secret and do the transpilation to ignition out at the edge, right? Um, but one of the things that I'm wondering about is like the kubeadm bootstrap provider has the implicit assumption that what's going to happen on the node is that there's going to be a cloud init that gets the machine ready, and then there will be some pre-kubeadm commands, then it will run kubeadm, and then there'll be post-kubeadm commands. And I'm like, do we have the same expectation with the ignition booted instances as well? Or because I know the way we use it in Red Hat is like, we have images that are already baked. They've already got all the Kubernetes stuff in them. So you would never need to run kubeadm on the actual node. You just start the services for kubelet and whatnot. And I was wondering, are ignition users having a similar experience, or are they wanting, okay.
So this more or less goes back to the wider topic on how we ship Kubernetes on Flatcar. We used to use image builder to basically just bake everything into a image, but that it always was a hack. And it even kind of violated the ignition philosophy of only boot once, because image builder boots the VM, right? And I mean, we just need to convince ignition that it never booted. So there are a few hacks in there. And we quickly overhauled that like a few years ago, and that's now the standard way of shipping Kubernetes in ClusterAPI with Flatcar by use of a Kubernetes system extension, like a sysext image. So it's not baked in. It is composed into the image-based OS at provisioning time. This is a detail that doesn't matter for your question. This system extension ships all the Kubernetes bits, all the Kubernetes configuration, and the bootstrapping code, and we rather like to keep it that way. Like the sysext will make sure that Kubernetes is installed in the right way when being provisioned, and it only needs a few like runtime data details, like what cluster am I talking to, what's the join token, and all of these things that are basically variable. And we expect those to be shipped with the variable config that goes into Ignition.
Okay.
But even without the sysext approach, we are using the pre-kubeadm commands. Here's an example with ClusterAPI OpenStack for you to see. But if I recall correctly, these pre-kubeadm commands and the post-kubeadm commands are injected into a kubeadm shell script that is being executed by the kubeadm service systemd unit. So everything is handled by the kubeadm provider, and it's being transpiled to Ignition or Cloud Init, whatever.
Okay. So we want to reuse the parts of the kubeadm bootstrapper that are like running the individual commands. Because like when I was looking at it, the kubeadm provider wants to run like kind of Docker exec commands in the node to prepare it for what's happening. We want to keep that functionality with the ignition experience, is what it sounds like. Like we want to keep these pre-kubeadm commands and presumably the post-kubeadm commands as well.
Yeah, to me, yes, it makes sense to keep them because we have some logic here that we need to get from the node when it's booting. For example, the host name or the the UID of the instance that needs to be injected in part of a kubeadm config, because it will set some useful informations for, I don't know, for the CCM, for example.
Okay.
For example, on the OpenStack example that I just shared, we extract the hostname and the instance UUID, and we modify them in the kubeadm .yaml configuration file that is being read by kubeadm service right after.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. So we're like, you're doing like a substitution on the kubeadm YAML and then like moving it to the right place, essentially.
Yeah. But I would expect quite similar stuff with other operating system. Let me check the default one. I was using
Right.
Ubuntu.
It's just as I pull apart, as I kind of pull apart the mechanisms for how this user data is passed, I'm trying to figure out like what's the best way to do this so that we don't, so we can. I don't want to make things more complicated and make like more toil for the people who have to implement this. So one of the things that I was kind of reconsidering was do we want to write our own Bootstrap provider? So that's why I was trying to understand like how much of the current Bootstrap provider do we need to keep with us? But it sounds like maybe we can just keep using it the way it is.
Yeah.
Let me see. I had a couple other questions here. Uh, okay, so looking at how the code paths differ for like Cloud Init and for Ignition, like the change that I'm looking at doing is like taking out the Ignition clause from the Bootstrap provider. So it will just always write kind of the Cloud Init style. And then writing a library, that I've kind of started to work backwards from the template that they use for Cloud Init so that we take the templated data, break it back apart from the template, and now we have it like in the individual pieces that we could then refeed into kind of the ignition templating that's happening. And what I'm trying to do is extract that ignition templating into a separate module in the cluster API repo so that the providers could then vendor that in. And they would say, okay, I'm going to read the secret, which is already happening kind of transparently. I'm going to read the secret. And then if the user has enabled ignition in the machine template for that provider, then it will exercise the same code that is currently being done and it'll repack it for ignition at that point. And that's kind of where I'm starting at here. But this is going to require putting an API change into the machine template that happens at that edge or whatever. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a way um, I can make like a common API snippet, and I think we could probably do that and keep that common snippet in the core cluster API. And then each of the providers could like include that snippet in part of their API template. This is like the least complicated I can make it at the moment, and without modifying the contract in the core of Cluster API, which sounds like they're not going to let us do that anyways. So
Well, I kind of agree. And basically, when I checked a few months ago, a few weeks ago, this old code base and everything to see how we could integrate easily this kind of transpiling step, I reached the same conclusion as you, that we should just integrate some snippets or whatever here to check if it's a ignition configuration, if a users has enabled the ignition experimental feature, and then do the things. And if nothing is set, we just act normally and consider it as cloud init.
right. Okay. Well, I think this answers my questions. I'll keep going with the proof of concept and hopefully, within I don't know how long, maybe a month or something like that, maybe we'll have a proof of concept to play around with and start looking at. Obviously, it'll be for Ignition V2 to start with, but once I break the module out in Cluster API, we should be able to add V3 like as we want to or whatever. So yeah, this is great. I'm glad to hear what you're thinking, Matthew. It sounds like I'm not totally crazy, so that's good. I'll keep going and see where we get to on this.
Yeah, and as I said last month, feel free to ping me into a pull request or even on your fork, like so we can just discuss implementation details or whatever. I will be just happy to review that.
Okay, yeah, and I started looking at after last time, I started looking at the OpenStack provider as well because I was like, well, if I'm going to do it for AWS, I could do it for OpenStack too, and then maybe you could test it on OpenStack or something and
Yeah,
see if it works there or whatever.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, I'll just keep working. Oh yeah, go ahead, Tilo.
Is this one more thing I'd like to at least bubble up as a suggestion? I think since we're doing significant changes to the way Ignition nodes will be deployed in the future anyways, I would quite strongly recommend to just go with Ignition version 3 and not care about version 2 at all. And the
Okay.
reason for that is you will find a way more usable and comfortable software environment, Go modules, Go dependencies, all of these will be well polished and up to date. That won't be the case for Ignition v2, I promise. Like you might end up in a 3 or 4 year old kind of code base that is no fun to work with. And I don't actually see a good reason to continue using v2 at that point. We need to make a hard cut anyways and have kind of a transition plan for the respective vendor providers, right? Um,
Yeah.
so all of this is already baked in, and that is complexity that we can't avoid when we introduce that change. So I think it would make no difference if we would go with version 3 right from the start, but it would make your life a lot easier.
Okay. I'm just worried like are we gonna break backward compatibility for people if we just move right to V if we like ignore the V2 parts
It
or whatever.
it's quite unlikely that this would happen,
Okay.
given that we need to introduce that change through Cluster API and the respective vendor providers anyways, and that even Flatcar with the Flatcar nodes supports Ignition version 2 only in a backwards compatibility way and has done so for years. Like people still, requiring Ignition version 2 because their nodes are old. Their nodes are so old, they definitely should consider updating. So yeah.
Totally. Totally. Okay. Then what I'll do, I'll probably refocus my efforts. I won't focus so much on pulling the old ignition stuff out. I'll just kind of leave it in place for now. And
Yeah.
I'll build this as a new parallel pathway. And the caveat will be not to use the ignition, don't use the ignition fields in the kubeadm config template. Just continue, leave it as cloud init.
Mhm.
The user will be responsible for doing the changes in their machine templates, not in the kubeadm config template. So we'll just kind of ignore those fields for now, and then we'll see where it gets us.
But yeah, even on the Flatcar side, as Thilo mentioned, we support both V2 and V3, but we are planning to drop the V2 compatibility because it's around since years, and yeah, it's a pain in the ass to maintain, and I think we need to start somewhere to transition to V3
Yeah.
only. And
So I
Fedora CoreOS did the switch like a few years ago, and they didn't care about backward compatibility. So I think we should be safe here. It just need to be announced.
okay, then I'll probably Matthew, I'll probably reach out to you when I get to the point where I'm trying to inject the V3 ignition stuff because I might need some advice about how to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
do you are you're on Kube Slack, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'll just make sure.
I'm in the Flatcar channel, Cluster API, various channels,
Okay.
OpenStack as well. So you find me. I will write my handle in the document.
Yeah. Yeah, or ping me on Kube Slack or something so I know your handle.
Okay.
You're not the only Matthew there apparently.
Okay, will do.
All right, awesome. Yeah, appreciate all the feedback and everything and yeah, I'll just keep cranking away on this stuff. We'll see what happens.
You folks want to record your attendance in the meeting minutes? Link is in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay, well I guess we'll probably talk in a couple weeks then, right?
Nice. Sounds great. Thanks for all your help and support.
Yeah,
Yeah, likewise. And I guess if you guys have I don't know if you guys have a long weekend or not, but if you do, enjoy your long
We
weekend.
do.
we do.
Awesome. Well, have a good one.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you around.
All right.